ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
When Daniel Nour was little, his favourite movie was Aladdin. Not just because Daniel felt like he was seeing his family's Middle Eastern culture given the Disney treatment with tiled courtyards, flying carpets and princesses, but also because in Aladdin, Daniel could watch a fit, shirtless guy swinging around town, flirting and being funny. The cartoon character was everything Daniel wanted to be and secretly wanted to be with. Daniel's a writer and a journalist. He grew up in Sydney with loving Coptic Egyptian parents who taught him how to bite back at bullies and how to expertly negotiate with car salesmen. But for years, Daniel was fighting against himself, against his relationship with food, with God, and with his sexuality. Daniel's debut book is a memoir called How to Dodge Flying Sandals and Other Advice for Life. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for that kind of slightly terrifying introduction there.
You grew up in the Sutherland Shire in Sydney. Was there a big Coptic Egyptian community there?
Well, you'd be surprised. We get around. And just, to be a little more precise, my dad's side of the family is Egyptian Protestant. I want to say possibly because of the British. I hear from my uncle back in the day, they converted my granddad, who was Coptic Orthodox, as, have all Egyptian Christians been historically, St. Mark and all of this. And my mum's side is the more, ritualistic, traditional Coptic side of the family. And the Shire was dotted with some Egyptian families, kind of like bits of pepper, perhaps. They really weren't. There weren't that many of them. I know that there was a family in our neighbourhood. There might have been one other Egyptian girl at my school, Bangor Primary. But we were, I suppose, middle class, slightly aspirational. And I did find, throughout the Shire, other small instances, if you like, of Arab families.
How had your dad come to Sydney from Egypt in the first place?
I think there were a few stages to this journey, but the war of attrition happened and their house was bombed. And so when, that war between the Egyptian and the Israeli militaries got underway, a lot of the families of Port Said, and specifically a little coastal town that he lived in called Antara, moved. I mean, they had to. They had no home. The home was left in rubble. I remember my uncle saying that the only thing they found when he went back maybe a couple of years later was my aunt's shoe. And she was, like a young girl at the time. And so then they went to Cairo. And from there, an uncle of his, there's always, I think, a pioneer, started that journey of immigration. And he moved to Melbourne. And then they got the whole process underway. And he came as, I think, a 16-year-old with my grandmother and my grandfather. And then he finished his teens here. And I suppose he kind of came of age here in Sydney.
How early was he expected to help contribute financially to this, immigrant family, a huge thing to move from Egypt to the other side of the world?
Well, pretty early. I mean, I remember him telling me stories about how he worked in a meat pie factory, I think in the inner west, with Polish, migrant workers, older men. Also with my grandmother before then at a bag factory where she would, I suppose, embroider and make, these decorative accessories. He felt that was a bit effeminate for him and a bit womanly, and he thought, no, I need to get out of here.
Need to get to the pie factory.
Well, that's it, mate. And actually he also finished school here, but my dad wasn't particularly academic. And he always had his eye on the prize. He wanted, I think, to be a working man, to have an income,
How did he first meet your mum?
Well, I'm told in kind of a classically abrupt way by him that he was so besotted with her, a word they would never use, that he followed her around in his car at the Coptic Orthodox Church in, I think it was Kingsford in the eastern suburbs. And she spotted him. This was his attempt at courtship, and then eventually wore her down through this kind of attrition tactic of, can I give you a lift? Is there anything you need? And eventually she just relented. I think that Mum also had another marriage offer, before then, and she was, and, is a very beautiful woman. And so I suppose the prize was there for Dad from the outset. And they married here. They married in that same church, I think in Kingsford. I'm fairly sure that's the case. And then they had this wedding reception at my grandparents' house.
So he began by pursuing her. Do you think she felt she made the right choice from what you observed about their dynamic as you were growing up?
Well, despite the slightly maudlin way I talk about, my migrant parents' marriage as being this kind of thing of necessity, I do think there's love there, and I think there's affection there. They rarely, if ever, kiss in front of me. But I think that he was the one for her because she felt that he adored her, which he does. And so I think it was right for her. And I think also there's this urgency, maybe in that generation, to start one's life, and this idea that you have to get out of your parents', or in my mum's case, her sister's home, in order to do that. So I think Dad was a visa on many levels.
If we were to look back in time at the little Daniel, what is it likely that you would have been doing? How did you spend your time as a kid?
Yeah, well, I had two older, and in fact, I have two older sisters. And so I have to say, because of the age difference, I didn't always have many people to play with. And, I'm my elder sister is 10 years my senior, and the middle is 7 years older than me. And so that kind of left me a little bit isolated. I was the only boy too. So I had this kind of very rich interior life, not to sound too wanky, and I was often to be found watching Sesame Street, a great classic. I would play a lot. I think I had toys a lot, and I did make believe. I dressed up. I remember, once donning my sister's dress, this kind of pink tulle number, and spinning. And I met with much embarrassment, shame, and I think also delight on some level by my mother, maybe. And it was a very imaginative childhood, I think I had.
Were you a shy kid, Daniel?
Well, I know it's hard to believe, but I was a shy, you ask my friends, but I was a shy kid, actually. And it took me a while to kind of feel permitted to speak up and to find my voice in that way. I was a loud kid, I think, eventually, but it took me a while to step into that, I think. And I did feel quite self-conscious growing up with sisters too, to be the only boy.
Were your parents okay about that? Did they respect that was the natural way you were socially, or was there a pressure to kind of be more sociable than maybe you felt?
There was that's very astute observation, Sarah, and I think that there's something about the Egyptian community in general that promotes outspokenness in children. We don't believe in that children should be, seen but not heard, or whatever the adage is. And I was often not reprimanded, but I was encouraged very sternly by my dad. Come on, Bob, speak up, speak your mind. If someone's asked you a question, you should answer. If an uncle or aunt asks you a question, you should answer. And it took me a couple of years, but I remember also this feeling that when I did that and I got into public speaking kind of in primary school, I was rewarded for it. People loved it, people encouraged it. It was very exciting to get that immediate feedback. So, yeah, there was that pressure.
Well, you became involved in something called the Tournament of Minds. Daniel, what is this thing and how did it help take you out of your shell a bit?
The Tournament of Minds. Yes, it has like the redolent of the Hunger Games.
It has that. I feel there should be dramatic sci-fi music playing as there's just that statement comes in bold letters. Yep.
Yeah. It's an ongoing primary school competition throughout the state of New South Wales. I don't know if it's national. I was selected for the tournament. I volunteered as tribute for the tournament because I remember my Year 5 teacher said to me, "Oh, Daniel, there's this competition. I think you'd be very good for it. And it's creative thinking, on your feet, there's problem solving, and I think you'd be good at it." And so I did it. What it was a group of primary schoolers led by a freckle-faced Year 6 boy, and we would respond to thinking challenges, either numerical or literary, all different categories. I think there was a science one, and there was like a global news element, and we would practice more or less every week up until this big kind of competition at UWS where we would go into the auditorium and be against other schools, placed in this competition where we would have to kind of hash it out, present a solution spoken up for, or rather presented by one of the students to this group of teachers who would mark us. And then I remember also there was this dramatic performance element where I think there was some kind of real life reenactment of how we would handle, I don't know, two nations that didn't have enough grain or something, and one of them had to give their resources. And I remember my principal saying, "Oh, Daniel's really come out of his shell, hasn't he?" And did this very flamboyant thing on the stage there at UWS.
What happened when your dad came along to one of these events?
Yes, well, Dad, again, because he insisted that I be seen and be visible, and although he was grappling and handling a lot of things at that time, we owned a mixed business in the city, he did drive me very enthusiastically to UWS on a Saturday morning, and he said, "Come on, go do the best job you can, Bob." And he said hello to my teacher, and then he was off making calls on Telstra, to the various kind of vendors that he needed to maintain for his shop. Whereupon when he realised that I was not being chosen to speak as much as the other students, he was really taken aback by this. His phone also very dramatically, I remember, went off in the middle of the auditorium during a pivotal moment, like a landmine in the Sinai. And I was so mortified by this.
Did he just shut it off?
No, it just went on and on and on. I remember it was like a minute ringing, and there was that ringtone, the buffoon. And it has that way of starting quietly and then getting very loud. And I remember him at one point looking around to see whose phone is that. And then eventually he realised what was going on and got up. "Hello, yeah. Daniel Nour speaking." And again, it was a vendor for the shop or something important like that. He walked out during the tournament. I was so embarrassed. I remember actually also being asked, "Was that your dad?" And I said, "No, I don't know that guy."
I think one of the most fraught places at school can be the swimming pool changing rooms. What were they like for you?
I didn't really feel myself in that environment, and I was very unsure of myself. And I think I did have a lot of body shame, or perhaps self-consciousness. Maybe shame is too strong a word for a child to be able to articulate, but I certainly felt very self-conscious. Because I was a portly kid always, and this was, I think, an occasion of some, maybe not joy, but pleasure for my mum to be able to grab my cheeks, and all of my uncles to kind of poke at my rolls affectionately. It was kind of tolerated in my family, and the assumption was I would grow out of it, when puberty.
And it means
set
you
in.
were well fed and well loved, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. So that's all fine, but then when you get to the change room in year 6, it's a completely different ballgame, because I was surrounded by rake-thin, very active Anglo boys. And also I was encouraged at all times to wear a flanella, which is the thin cotton singlet that Arab boys often don in all weather conditions. And this was a kind of safety blanket for me, because it meant that I didn't have to reveal my body. I didn't have to take my shirt off and show my soft paunch and my nipples and all of this. And it didn't help, because that also became an object of derision, The other thing is I was such a poor swimmer that the feeling of being kind of this foreign, oddity was exacerbated. I would flail in the pool while the other boys would swim very confidently down the lanes. We had in year 5 or year 6 this kind of categorized system of swimming. So the very elite swimmers were the sharks, whereas I was like platypus or some other sad marsupial.
The wombats down the end.
The wombat. Anyway, it was a very tricky time. It
sounds like, it's the classic thing. Kids can be really cruel, and it can be that isolating thing at school where you've just got to turn up every day and kind of encounter this stuff. Did you tell your mum and dad about what was happening?
I did. I remember one day I didn't, because I was so scared to take my shirt off. I remember one day I didn't, and I just was sodden with the chlorine of the pool water, and then just wore my school uniform on top. And I got home and I said, "Oh, Mum, I didn't actually shower." And I remember her looking so displeased with this. "You're going to catch a cold." And then she quickly took all my clothes off and, I think probably threw me into the shower. But I did tell them. And I think the challenge for a young boy is it's quite tricky to articulate what it is you're going through. Bullying is something very hard to describe because it requires a knowledge of, power imbalances, which you don't have as an 11-year-old. You just think this is normal and this is how teachers treat you. And in my case, how they, I think, by their negligence, mistreated me because they were unable to step up to the responsibility of noticing. And I know teachers do a very good job, but I think there are some instances where they don't exactly have capacity for, noticing when there's an injustice in the classroom or when one kid is being singled out. And also because it was a very Anglo neighbourhood, I don't think there was and I hope this has changed now, but, in the 2000s and the late 90s, I don't know that people understood what it meant to be bullied on the basis of race or really acknowledged it. And that happened too, like Daniel's sisters are, they're from Aladdin, or Daniel's hairy, or all of these, very kind of classical tropes that you get about Arabs. And so all of this was too much for me. And I remember that I was just sad. I would go home looking sad. And my mum and dad knew something was off.
Your mum eventually took you to see a child psychologist. How did that meeting play out?
Yeah, it was at the Community Services Precinct of Menai, which is a suburb in the Shire. And I don't know how it happened exactly, but I imagine she spoke to Mrs. Hayes, my Year 1 teacher, or another teacher. And they took me to this lady who had this kind of neat bob cut. I've described her as having a neat bob cut that suited her neat, well-rehearsed answers. And she was a pretty woman, sitting in her chair, very professional looking. And I just felt so strange. Why am I in this office, this psychologist's office? So I didn't know that's exactly what it was then, but why is this lady asking me all these questions? So, Daniel, how do we feel when you're bullied? Okay. And the use of the word bullied as well kind of put it into context for me. And what do we say? I think it's really important that we tell a teacher when someone makes fun of us. And my mum and dad, I could see that it wasn't working for them, this advice. And instead, they kind of encouraged her to show me ways to talk back to the bullies.
Like with what kind of phrases?
Oh, you're skinny as skeletons. Oh, you're as white as a ghost. It's
so
really
insult for insult.
It's top tier comedy, Sarah, that I'm giving. And my mum and dad preferred this because they felt that at least that way I think I would be equipped to speak up for myself. And the very soft-handed approach didn't exactly work for them. I'm sure that they would like a teacher to be involved, but they also realised that practical imperative that I had to be able to defend myself.
So whose advice did you follow? The psychologist with the neat bob, or your parents urging you to, meet them where they were?
I think I spoke up for myself a little bit more, and it's something that I've gotten better at. And I've actually become quite catty now, I think I'm quite biting in my comments. I try and work on that. But, I mean, there is that too, that quality of making a joke quickly and pivoting so that you can show people that you're funny and that is the value that you add socially.
How important was church and faith in your family's life?
It was everything. Every Sunday morning, for years, I remember going to Sunday school. We went to this Protestant church in kind of the Georges River area of Sydney, an Egyptian Protestant church. And it wasn't just, the ritual of church. It was the community, having all of our extended relations there, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, and also all of my parents' family friends, like their peers, my mum's friends, the women she would debrief about her week with and complain with and laugh and, kind of cackle over baklawa and sandwiches. It was a ritual of community. And it still is for them, I think, because it was the way that they got to know their people and use Arabic, which they probably didn't have much call for during the work week, It was everything. And then, of course, there was the level of the belief, the faith.
And is that something you remember according with as a child? Was there a spirituality for you as a young boy where the teaching and the ritual of that church resonated with you?
I was going to say no, because maybe that's kind of the more contemporary thing to say, and just to say that it's a place where I was seen and celebrated for being, again, a good student, memorising the Bible verses, performing the church play with a little bit of charisma, being celebrated as this show pony with a personality and an ability to speak. But actually, I did have a sense of something bigger than myself, and I do feel like God has always been a comfort to me, and the notion of God, and I think I felt that from a young age. I really do.
young do you think you were, Daniel, or how early did you have an awareness of that church's teaching about homosexuality? I guess sexuality in general, but particularly about homosexuality.
I remember feeling attracted to other boys when I was 11 because I remember there was the school captain was so handsome to me and I just felt very nervous around him and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then at the age of 12 I thought, oh no, I know what this is. But one buries it, because the knowledge of that is so scary. And I remember reading little, excerpts from the Bible, verses from the Bible that were, terrifying in their condemnation of, or my perceived, my understanding of those verses was that they absolutely condemned homosexuality. It is an abomination. They shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Maybe at the beginning of high school is when I really began to understand that. But anyway, it was so exotic. The idea of being gay was so out there that I couldn't even really kind of metabolize it for myself or really consider it as a possibility for myself. Gay people were this thing that you sometimes saw on TV. They were just, if not a perversion, then an embarrassment and something that we didn't talk about,
Was there any Google searching that you did to try to satisfy the part of you that was curious about
Oh, yeah,
men?
obviously, just for research purposes.
And what sort of, given that we're a family program, what sort of search words went into your Google search?
Well, things like Greco, because, high school history, very interesting to me, Greco-Roman wrestling, Egyptian prince naked, Greek soldier naked. And also, that movie, The Mummy, was a real moment. I thought, really helped settle some things.
The Mummy. This is the Dwayne The Rock Johnson, The Mummy. Is that right? Is he in that?
Thank you for asking, Sarah.
It's taken an unexpected turn, Daniel.
Thank you for asking. And, really this is what I wanted to get to. So I'm really glad that we're getting to the meat and potatoes here of the podcast. For those listening, The Mummy Returns is the sequel to Brendan Fraser's hit, performance in The Mummy, where he was I think to be found shirtless in a cage as a prisoner in Egypt. And then Dwayne The Rock Johnson played the Scorpion King of the title, the titular role of the Scorpion King, where he was so beautiful and so muscular and so huge and tan that, again, it really made me think my heart is racing. My heart is racing.
This really leaves cartoon Aladdin in the shade, I have to say, even this description. You had your grandparents living with you at different times, Daniel. Is that a common thing in Egyptian culture?
What happened is that my grandmother got very ill after the death of my grandfather, and I noted that my granddad, who was taken care of by my uncle and auntie with, great attention and actually devotion over many years, and that it can't be easy to take care of a grandparent who has had a stroke. That experience was kind of replicated when we took care of my grandmother.
How important was that for your family and the community more broadly?
There is this incredible sense of fidelity and loyalty and responsibility for this old person. We do not believe in nursing homes in our community. We do not believe in, and I know this is probably a bit pejorative, but outsourcing them. They are our responsibility. They have to live under our roof. Even sometimes where we're not very well equipped to do it, we don't necessarily have the understanding or the resources. My grandmother got very sick. She had some kind of respiratory issues and terrible breathing problems. And as well as that, she had really bad arthritis. And so it was difficult times taking care of her. She was in pain. She would shout out in the middle of the night. But when people came over, it's a happy family and everything's okay. No, we're fine. We'll get Teta her tea. Yes, come sit with us. We'll have a prayer meeting. And there was this appearance of, kind of having it all together. And I think this pressure of appearances is big in the Egyptian community and not really asking for help.
What do you remember of her funeral, Daniel?
Yeah, my granddad's funeral, if I can speak more to that, I remember was this shambolic obviously sad, but also kind of slightly catastrophic event because I remember the venue was too small. We couldn't fit all the people in. People are upset with a relative's choice of why did you choose this bloody church hall? It can't fit anyone. Why did your uncle do that? People are streaming out the back. And I remember from all of the funerals that I have noted in the Egyptian community, the laudatory way that people are spoken of. She was a woman of God, he was a man of God, and both for my granddad and my grandmother, they are I consider them great kind of leaders in our family, but they had tempers, they had really tricky opinions. I've written that my granddad was a little bit racist towards anyone other than, other Arabs. And he was a lovely man, but he was a human being. And I think that I just remember how much, frankly, lying was going on at that time. Well, let's say exaggeration of the facts to say that everything was great, that he is now in the bosom of Jesus, and that we can entrust him to, the heavenly realm.
Daniel, how did your mum and dad talk about Egypt when you were growing up? Was it a place they longed for?
Well, my mum said that she found Egypt dirty and unlivable. She could see that the price of living was becoming, unreasonable, and it remained so. My dad, I think, had this more nostalgic fondness for it because he grew up in this coastal city, whereas my mother was more urban. Both of them began their lives in a village, and then kind of before they came here, they were Cairo-bound. Certainly Mum. I think that there is a little bit of nostalgia on both sides, but mainly on my dad's. But I also, I still haven't got to the bottom of what it takes to cut ties like that and to begin afresh. Australia could be Mars for an Egyptian in the 50s. It's that foreign and, that otherworldly. So I don't know how they did it.
So was Egypt a country that you dreamed of visiting, of wanted to go to when you could?
Yes, I remember at the end of high school I began to imagine myself kind of impressing my cousins and saying, oh yeah, I grew up in Australia and I can speak Arabic and English, and of course my Arabic was hideous and it still is not fantastic. I had this also fascination with this Egyptian culture, the antiquity, the beauty of the temples, the beauty of the ancient religion. It is still so alluring to me, and so that was part of it too.
So, how did you first get the opportunity to visit Egypt?
So I've been back 5 times actually, Sarah. The big time is this Return to Your Roots trip. It was a state-sponsored trip where the Egyptian Minister of Immigration, kind of like an ambassador, would come here and say, we want you to return to your roots. It was called Return to Your Roots. You to understand, you are foot soldiers for Egypt abroad. You are carrying the patriotic flame of Egypt within you. This was the kind of language she used at the consular office in the city here in Sydney. And so then I was tasked with organising it by an uncle in the community. We want you to get the passports together. We want you to start doing the itinerary, planning with them, get it all underway. It was out of this world. It was so weird. It was an incredible way to see the country.
Well, what stands out when you think back to that trip? What were the sights that really had an impression on you?
There was this one moment where we met with soldiers in the military training ground, and I'm sure I'm betraying state secrets here. We saw them go through their paces in this really demanding obstacle course. The other thing about the Egyptian military is because there is this kind of exaggerated fear of homosexuality in the culture, they don't realise they're so gay, they're so camp. All the men are unnecessarily shirtless, and there's this bravado, kind of like hypermasculinity edging on like the village people or some kind of performance of masculinity. They don't need to be shirtless. There is no need in this context. They would do things like go under rungs, like the what do they call it? That kind of military setting where you're under a series of ladders on the ground. They would run up walls. I remember also a fire pit that they had to jump across. And then also they did this weird thing where they showed us, and if you have a squeamish disposition, avert your ears now, how to dismember a snake in real time. And this guy pulled with his teeth the head off a snake.
Wait a minute. Is this something that's an important part of the Egyptian military, dismembering snakes?
Because they're in the Sinai and they're often to be found, I think, in very hard situations. So sometimes this happens that they don't have access to food. They need to be able to work with, what's available to them. Again, there's no need for us to see this. But anyway, I remember just how excessive it was, and it gave me the chance to ask the Minister of Youth a question. we were sitting in this boardroom and all of these TV cameras were around. He's quite a handsome man, and it was a few years after the revolution where famously, young people were imprisoned and they were unseen and unheard of after they were imprisoned, because the mukhabarat, the secret police, are very scary in Egypt and very effective. And I asked him, in this moment when they were saying, we will have the World Cup here, it will be a wonderful experience, all the other 20-somethings clapped. And I don't know what came over me, but I had this compulsion, maybe because I grew up wanting to be this kind of intrepid reporter. Minister, thank you so much for the trip. We would like to know what happened to the young people of the revolution, especially those that have been imprisoned. The way this guy's face dropped, and I felt like, well, they're going to shoot me. This is the end. Of course they didn't, because it was all on camera and it was supposed to be this lovely patriotic thing for the young people. And he said, we're not here to just serve the elites. That's how he kind of misconstrued it, but rather the whole of the Egyptian population. And he just changed the subject. And I'm still very proud of myself for putting myself on the line like that.
As part of that journey to Egypt, you made a trip up the Nile. Where did you set sail from?
Because it flows upstream, we set sail in the south and then went back north.
And what was the boat like?
Well, I thought it would be this kind of fabulous Victorian, this decadent, something like the Titanic. The way that the hinges were falling off the saloon doors, the tables looked like they had seen better days, the leather in the lounge was kind of depressed. It was all very disappointing, I have to say. And we're foreigners and enjoying the hospitality of this country where people, in many cases, are living, day by day with not quite enough food to make it by. There is a poverty problem in Egypt. I didn't really feel like I wanted to complain about it so much as to say it is so, so funny the way it was lauded as the Karnak, the gem of the Nile. But really it was like a bad dinghy, like a large dinghy, I want to say.
You were there with a whole bunch of other young people with Egyptian heritage from around the world. I'm sure there was romantic liaisons happening, as does at these sort of events. Was there any chance for you to explore that while you were away from home?
I was still so closeted, Sarah, up until my early 30s that it was very difficult for me to know what to do. And I remember actually one guy on the trip said to me, "Are you gay?" Because the topic came up. The way I lied through my teeth. No. This guy loves women. It was sad. It was really sad, I have to say, because I was just coming, you get to a breaking point, don't you?
And I think also, like all classical cultures, there is amazingly frank depiction of sexuality in ancient Egyptian art and mythology. So you're being exposed to that, not just from your early days of Googling Egyptian soldier nude, but, the stories of Egyptian myth, the statues. Was that something you were being exposed to, that history too?
Yeah, and that's so annoying, isn't it? Like, it's right there in our faces and yet we can't talk about it. There's a tondo that we all saw of two guys that are called the lovers. Some people think they're brothers. A lot of people think they were lovers. Another one of two men who were buried together. It said they will be together in life and now they are together in death. Now I realise how dumb it is that I didn't say anything. But also, there's a logic in it because it was unsafe for me, and it is culturally unsafe to be queer in Egypt. You could not proclaim that without wanting to go to prison.
This was also a time in your life, Daniel, where you were struggling with just how you were physically. What was going on with that? How are you feeling about your body in your 20s?
Always I've been plagued by this, and I think Instagram has exacerbated this problem, but this maybe illusory or idealistic standard of male physical perfection. The men that I see on Instagram have the lean, the body mass index of greyhounds or lean racehorses, I'm just not built like that. And also in the gay community, and I think this is something especially with gay men, is this extremely visual culture. We are drawn to what we see. There is a tiered system that esteems and prioritizes white gay men. And then the other various races fall into succession. So this has always informed the way that I see myself. I remember I actually hired a trainer, quite a really kind of masculine guy, and he whipped me into shape over a couple of years. But I can't say that I felt fantastic afterwards.
Why? What was not good about that?
Oh, because he would give me all of this unsolicited advice about other things. Like once I fumbled the chest press and he said, "Oh, you doubt yourself." Like, really?
Just have a slippery hand.
He told me about Wim Hof, that guy who does the cold plunges. There's this holistic thing that is, I think, this false equivalency between, you know, the way you look and your value as a person, the way you look and the integrity of your character and the strength of your discipline. And that's just not real. That's not how it works. I just enjoy the taste of food. I'm greedy. You know what I mean?
And also it's such an aggressive attitude towards your own body that can happen in that kind of approach to personal training. There's this enemy or this sort of weakling that you've got to battle into submission. That doesn't actually help anyone with their feelings of self-hatred. In fact, it can intensify it, I guess.
And yet, if you don't mind me saying, there was this slightly horny feeling about it, you know, like this guy is it, like look at him. He wasn't a very sweet or even frankly handsome guy, but he had that kind of dead shark-eyed, you know, intensity that I found quite attractive. Push, bro, push. And so there was this conflation with my kind of fantasy life as well that happened there.
Well, you kept that up for a while, but how did Nigella Lawson help you make peace with who you actually are and how your body is?
Ah, yes, my queen. Well, Nigella, who I recently had the incredible privilege of running into in the green room of Sydney Writers' Festival, she was just sitting there. The way I gushed at this woman.
I'm sure you're not the first,
She
Daniel.
has such charisma. Riz, that's what the kids are calling it. This one has Riz. The way she lights up the room.
What did you love about her? Why was she your queen, as you call her?
Okay, well, she is a bit of a gay icon. I think she has this incredible camp theatricality, and I think that she has this eloquence, which I found very charming. And she's beautiful. But then also there's this thing of the joy and the pleasure that she derived from food, the confidence that she had around what to prepare and how to serve it, that I found very comforting. And I guess it reminded me on some level of those very convivial family banquets that my mother would serve all through my childhood. We had lots of, you know, the youth group of my church over, and we have these big parties in our hall room, and it was fantastic, and we felt so it was so fun. And I think she became an emblem of that, and that it's okay to take pleasure in these things. And so it helped me see food as a kind of a means of pleasure rather than just that currency of value that we have in gym culture, which is it is either lean protein or empty carbs and nothing else.
Your mum and dad still played an active role in your life after you became an adult, and it was your dad who took you to buy your first car. What car did you have your heart set on, Daniel?
Oh, I still have it. It's a Kia Sorado.
Dreams do come true.
Dreams come true. It was a 2014 Kia Sorado. It has a leather interior. It heats my bottom upon the touch of it. I've never had that before. I mean, not in a car. And it's the car that marked me out as a man. You know, not to be too lofty, but it's that thing of, you know, you make a purchase that transitions you from the functional car of your 20s to the kind of impressive, now I'm a career person, car of your 30s. And so that's what it was.
And how did your dad handle that negotiation with the car salesman?
It was really funny, Sarah. And the way that he was because he is a good negotiator. He is, I have to say. Now, that's not to say that, you know, he always has fantastic logic, but he knows how to work a deal. He walked in slightly hunched with his sciatica, but still kind of with a rugged kind of charisma, with a walking stick that he doesn't really need. And he had hit the hubcaps and the tyres of the cars to get the attention of the dealer. He was baiting his catch. They came to him. What ensued was the funniest, most stressful, I want to say 2 hours of negotiation that I've seen.
How did the dealer respond to this invitation that your dad was putting down?
Well, Dad absolutely went in stoic, lowballed him, complained, "What's this car? Tell me about it. What, is it any good?" And of course he knew exactly which car we wanted. The dealer said, "Well, you'll have to decide that for yourself," and indulged Dad in a test drive. And when Dad started prodding him, he said, and I thought that he would just kind of relent or say, "Let me get my manager." He was a young guy in his 20s, you know. He said, "Well, Mr. Nour, actually, there are many other people who are interested in the car, and if you don't like it, then I'll see you out myself." He had that. He was
going to play hardball.
He was also going to play hardball, which I was surprised by. he may not have said it in those exact words, if I can be honest, but he did dispense with all of the niceties. I was very impressed by this kid, made of tougher stuff than he looks. And then they really started negotiating.
And did you get involved? You know, were you supposed to be showing your skills as a negotiator as well in all of this?
When I first walked in, stupidly, I said to him, "Oh, wow, the car looks really nice," loudly. "The car looks really nice, so it's in good condition." And he said to me, "Mr. Ulum min al-Arabiya Agbek," pulled me aside, which in Arabic means, "Don't let them know that you like the car."
Duh.
And then I just I'm honestly very quiet for the rest of that time. I only spoke when called upon.
So you've got this beautiful, close relationship, clearly, with your family. But back then in your mid to late 20s, what kind of pressure were you under from them to find yourself a wife and start giving them grandchildren?
There's just no other way, or it doesn't seem that there's another way. And so even though it wasn't really explicated until maybe my late 20s, there was always this underlying assumption. I remember it was maybe 28, 29. "Don't you want to get a wife? Don't you want to bring a girl?" And especially when we went to get my first apartment. I own this little apartment now in the Bankstown area. And Dad said to me, "Well, don't you want to get a wife?" As though the implication of having an apartment is that you'll have a wife there. The pressure has always been there, and I indulged it by dating girls with very little success all throughout my 20s. And I just felt that I had to play that role.
Were you still going to church with your family
yes.
at this point?
Well, I did this strange thing where I tried to get a little bit of distance. I did go to church, but not with my family. And I think that was my attempt at carving out my own way. And it was at this stage that I dabbled more in the Coptic community. The Egyptian Coptic community is mainly Orthodox, but there's also an Egyptian Catholic church here in Sydney. And I explored their beliefs, thinking that maybe if I find this more ritualistic way, I'll be protected from the kind of Protestant, imperatives, the more straightforward thinking of man and woman. I mean, at least Catholics and Orthodox have priests, they have monks, they have things like this.
So were you even considering that might be an avenue for you, joining the priesthood?
Well, I went to one of those seminary tours that they did through the Sydney Archdiocese, the Catholic Church in Sydney, and I was intrigued, I think, by the nobility of it, which is that you are serving the community. It is a sacrifice, but you have a life of vocation. Obviously, also, you're protected from marriage and from the imperative to get married, so there's that too. I think I didn't really consider it seriously, Sarah, although I thought about it for a second there. But at the end of the day, I think my desire to be a storyteller and to be in the media and to kind of present this kind of work, it was just more attractive to me. You can't do that.
So was this a period where it was kind of becoming a crunch time for you? Like there's this sense of how you're still meeting expectations externally, but internally knowing that there's a truth in you that wants to get out. Did it feel like a tussle in that way?
It all started coming to a head. It was a tussle. In some ways it still is, but I definitely came through. Something broke open in me, which is that I started properly dating guys.
How did that start? Like, that's such a momentous kind of shift from thinking I'm going to maybe have to become a celibate Catholic priest. Like, did you reach out to a support group or did you confide in anyone or how did it happen?
Well, I've described it to a friend because he said it's like you changed overnight. But I think you lay the groundwork for many, many years unknowingly. Something that happened to me that really helped kind of blast me into the present moment of the thing, into a more realistic take, is that I did this Christian TV show on SBS. It was a reality theme show called Christians Like Us. And I had to play the role there because, it made sense. They wanted it for the story and I was happy to oblige, of the conservative Christian, Egyptian Christian guy. Conservative on family values, marriage is between a man and a woman. I even had the gall to say that on public TV in a maroon shirt. Marriage is between a man and a woman. And that's the way God has it. And that's it, honey, And it was only a few months after that, weeks even, and this was like maybe 2018, that I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. I think if you are in denial for a long time, you need a big embarrassment to shake you out of the illusion, you know. And that was it for me. Seeing myself on that screen saying marriage is between a man and a woman and being celebrated for that by my community and yet feeling so sad and depressed made me realize this isn't going to work. Something has to give. I did see a therapist. I did speak to, I had these terrible panic attacks, I remember at that time. And I saw this gay therapist. He was a man who worked with with men from migrant backgrounds. And he showed me that there was a path that didn't require me to just pull off the Band-Aid, to do it gradually until I was able to come out in a more complete way.
So is that a kind of conversation that you've had to have with your parents and extended family, the coming out conversation?
Yeah. Well, it is an ongoing conversation, but also I think the notion of coming out is a little bit limited for queer people of colour, and it's less about coming out and more about letting others in. I think that it's necessary to have cultural safety in order to come out, and it implies that you have somewhere to come out to. I didn't. Instead, I was able to forge for myself slowly a support network of close friends. And then when I moved out, which was huge for me, then I was able to begin to claim my place. Now my parents know that my partner is not just my special friend or indeed just my housemate, but he's really my life partner. As to whether they support or truly deeply acknowledge this, I'm not sure. Denial runs deep.
So are there just some subjects in practice that you kind of avoid with your family?
I don't bring it up every lunch. Every time I go there, it's too much. It gets very stressful. I don't bring it up every time. But if Mum says, "What are you doing?" I say, "Oh, I'm with Kashif." "What are you doing this afternoon?" "Oh, I can't come over, I'm sorry, because Kashif and I are going shopping." Or so if I use his name. And I think that has been important for me.
And brave, Daniel. I mean, as is writing this memoir, which is explicit about this part of yourself and the complexity of who you are. What do your parents think about the book?
My parents are quietly, certainly my dad, and my mum too, to be fair, are quietly proud. The fact that I have my name on the book, Benjamin Law gave me this incredibly, humbling endorsement on the front that said something like, "You will eat it up." And Mum said to me in Arabic, "Let them eat," So, and Dad's just pleased that I'm selling a book,
Good. I hope you got a good price for that deal. I hope he helped you in any contract negotiation that you needed.
Absolutely. By the way, will this interview be paid? Because if not, I can get Dad in.
We better stop right now.
I can get Dad in. No, I'm just kidding.
Have they read the book?
No, I don't really know if I want them to read the book. I mean, it's available if they ask, but I would prefer not because it is explicit and embarrassing. I mean, I tell stories about no one wants their parents to read about their bungled, romantic encounters. Unless, they have to have a Freudian, probably an issue. So there is that too. It's just I don't need them to read it in order for them to be proud of it.
As you're describing your childhood and your family, religion and faith has been this really important part, a complicated part, but a really important part. What place does all that have in your life now?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I did even as a child get this sense that there was something up there, some warm, protecting presence. And I do have faith. I have a very progressive uniting church community that I go to now in Sydney's Inner West, Leichhardt Uniting Church. And I found in them a refuge and grace without exclusions, because the whole head game that I worked through in my 20s and 30s that caused me so much torment is how to bifurcate myself, if you like, or like to separate myself from my sexuality. And they have that bogus thing of I'll love the person but hate the sin, love the sinner, hate the sin. You can't do that. You can't divest yourself of your humanity like that. You are a whole person. Leichhardt is not like that. They say we appreciate all of you, your romantic life is just as, if you like, holy as any other act of devotion. And it can be. And love is truly love. It requires sacrifice and care and all of these virtuous things, you know. So I feel more whole, I have to say, and I feel like I have found a place that accepts me and celebrates me. But at the end of the day, I've also had to, I think, give that to myself, you know, and not expect that there is an institution that will say you're okay.
This life that you're living now in an apartment with your boyfriend, with driving this Kia Cerato, making your living as a writer and a journalist, what do you think little Daniel would have thought of the life that you've made for yourself?
I really feel sorry for that kid sometimes when I see pudgy boy.
Sweet boy.
Sweet boy. No, sweet boy. I think he would be thrilled. And I think on some level, in some mystical way, he believed it could happen. It could be like that one day. But it just took him a while to get there. And I think he would be so pleased. I think he would be so delighted, actually.
Well, it's been delightful to meet you, Daniel. Thank you so much for being my guest on Conversations.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure.
Podcast, broadcast, Conversations with Sarah Konoski.
Daniel Nour's memoir is called How to Dodge Flying Sandals and Other Advice for Life, an unreliable ethnic memoir. And Daniel is a member of the sweatshop literacy movement in Western Sydney. This conversation will be available for you shortly as a podcast. It was recorded on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples and of the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation. The producer was Maggie Morris. Our executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Sarah Konoski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Konoski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.